Welcome to this week's episode of Done and Dusted. We're here to help you with your most vexing family law questions. Today, I'm joined by Darren Mort, who is a leading family law barrister in Australia and my fellow Zoomcaster. So thanks, Darren, for going on this journey with me. And we're delighted to welcome Lilia Szarski. Lilia Szarski has a wealth of experience at working with families in the post-separation space. And gosh, I hate to think how long Darren and I have known Lilia. We won't go there because it'll age all of us, but I think our collective wisdom is has many zeros at the end of it. So Lilia, let's start with just talking a bit about you and your experience in family law. I know it's been broad and I know it's been deep, but let's talk about your focus at the moment.
Oh, thanks a lot for having me on this Zoomcast. Yes, I'm a child and family psychologist and worked in the family law court when it first started and gained a lot of experience in the family law space. And since then, I've also been a family dispute resolution practitioner, helping people navigate parenting plans and try to resolve some of their conflicts. But I'm also provide court-ordered therapy and parenting coordination. So I've been involved in the separated family space for a long time, and I work a lot with both adults, children, and the extended family. You can't ignore the fact that there's a whole lot of other systems behind the two parents that we actually see all the time, or even the children that we see all the time.
And Darren does a lot of independent children's lawyer work. So and I have in the past. So what we're really saying there is that family law problems are many layered and there are many players that can be associated with a family law separation. It's just not mum and dad separating or two parents separating, is it, Lilia?
Absolutely not. And I think sometimes because in the law system, and I'm sure Darren will attest to this, is that you're seeing mum and dad, but you've got to remember that they come from their own family systems, their own, what I call their own tribes, their own influences, their own people who think they have a vested interest. And sometimes those people, unfortunately, have some of their own agendas, which then influence the way that people make decisions. And the difficulty is that children who have to navigate between all the various homes kind of are doing all the work. They're the ones who have to move not only physically, but they also have to move emotionally from one parent to another, emotionally attached, detached, all with the family systems. And then I think people forget the one other journey that children need to actually undertake. And parents forget this a lot. It's what I call the psychological journey. They might be with one parent themselves, king of the castles, whatever, and then they move to the other parent, but maybe that parent has repartnered or has other people living there, and suddenly their birth order changes. They're no longer the firstborn. They might be in the middle or at the end because there are other stepchildren involved. So children have to navigate psychologically a different family system each time they move between parents. And I think parents sometimes forget that they're asking their children to both move physically, emotionally, and psychologically each time they move and inhabit the two different homes.
Yeah.
I remember, gosh, it was a little while ago now, you gave a compelling presentation, Lilia, on parental alienation. I know we're not talking about that tonight because that's a whole topic of its own, but it really rang true with me during that presentation, you speaking about the need to unpack both parents in relation to getting down to the core of the issues that are bubbling beneath the surface. Because once upon a time, there was a school of thought that, if mum's not promoting a relationship, well, let's unpack her. But it's really important, isn't it, that you're unpacking both sides to try and analyse exactly and evaluate what's happening in that particular dynamic.
Absolutely. And the word dynamic is really the crucial word. Both parents bring to their relationship their own dynamics from the past, their own family of origin. And when they are faced under stress about trying to negotiate things or even have a very toxic relationship, all those past hurts from other relationships, from other family of origins come in to play. And the children are then the recipients of their parents' I won't call it presenting problems, their past relationship problems or past family of origin problems. And until you actually find each member of the family, what their contribution has been, not only to the current dispute, but what they brought in and their mindset, you're not really going to be able to build the bridges that we're hoping to make when we've got people with children who aren't seeing the other parent, or parents who are really bitter with each other.
So true.
And so some of the themes there, Lila, are the stress that parents feel, but also that perhaps for the listeners, the people who are actually going through separation at the moment, yes, you may well feel stress, but stop and think about how that impacts on your children. So you've made that point beautifully, and that is a child doesn't choose this. A child doesn't choose divorce. We often say that children, provided mum and dad aren't in conflict when they separate, I don't know what utopia that is. There's always some form of conflict because it's change. And in the middle of this change, children might often feel like flotsam and jetsam in the relationship with their parents. So how do you go about educating parents when you're working in that therapeutic model to help them better understand what it is that their children might be thinking or feeling?
A couple of things. I mean, a lot of my colleagues and myself would say psychoeducation helps, but I don't think you can keep lecturing parents. They don't want to hear. Under stress, they're only hearing every third word. So you might as well, end up repeating yourself, and that doesn't actually help. What you need to look at is think, what was it like for them when they were that age? What was it like for them when they were children, to get them into that space of a child, right? And what I try and do is get them to think about what was it like for them at that age? What would they say to a child? Can they tune in to where their children are at, or are they really so stuck where they are because of their own personal hurt or humiliation? And what you have to do is balance engaging with the adults' feelings and thoughts with them to try and move them into the children's space. And we can't ignore one for the other. You can't just keep talking about, oh, it's the best interest of the children and the conflict is difficult. People need to implement change, but they've got to accept that they need to do something different. I often say to them, if tomorrow was different, you woke up tomorrow and everything was different, what would it look like? What would it look like for you as an adult and a parent? What would it look like for your child if that was the case? And then when I work with children, I do a similar sort of thing to give them a future focus that things can be perhaps different, or if they're going to stay the same, how they can manage it. One of the things I find with parents is that they're stuck. They just want to be validated for where they are. They don't really want to look beyond that. They need somebody to pat them on the back saying, yes, you're right, yes, you're right. And when you try to move them from yes, you're right to actually what does your child need is a bit of a quantum leap for some parents.
I'm getting onto that bandwagon at the moment about validation because, well, I think we were saying in last week's program, Caroline, or maybe the week before, that it's really important because the adults are going through this. I mean, put the kids to one side for the minute, but the adults are going through this. They don't need people telling them how they should be doing things, or judges telling them how they should be parents, or psychologists or whatever. Sometimes the parents just need a bit of self-soothing themselves and just and have that validation. It means, I suppose, Lila, and you'd be best to answer this, when you do have that validation and you do soften them up, they're open to more suggestive ways to bridge those gaps, maybe. Because I just find, you know, we were talking about this before. I just wonder, do you ever say to a parent, now listen, if I just want you to be the child for a minute, and I just want you to ask that child how that child sees what's going on inside your household at the moment.
Oh, yes. The empty chair approach is a really good thing to do. And I'm sure in your acting career there, Darren, you talk to an empty chair now and again.
Yeah, I do.
It's the same thing. You get them to talk to themselves and you get them to move from one chair to another. I always have more in my office and say, now you're the child, talk to yourself. Now you're the adult, talk back again.
Oh, fascinating. Right.
So it's about helping them rehearse what it's like. But you make a good point. Unless the parents feel heard, then their issues, their needs, they will not shift. You can't just stand and say, well, okay, but nobody said I'm okay. And it's like okay generally, but it's a case of they've not necessarily behaved very well at the particular point in time.
So it's like a Band-Aid on wet skin, right, Lila? It just slides right up.
I like that.
Unless they've had a lot of counselling themselves, and this is part of the problem, I think, Lila, that you're talking about, and that is when you start to unpack a family in family therapy, you're getting each individual story, if you will, but you're getting it in stereo. And that's why Darren's work and my work when we're working with our clients is really about saying, I get it. I actually understand where you're coming from. It's okay to feel that way.
Yeah.
But what you're also saying, Lila, is, but you can't feel that way forever because there'll be no change.
I will say this, that I did have clients where I asked them, did you want to feel like this from now on? And they kind of said, yeah, why can't I? I said, well, is it helping you or harming you? Right? If that's the way you want to do it, let's work out a plan that you at least feel that way, but you can slightly sort of minimize the impact on the children. You can't tell somebody how not to feel.
Yeah.
Opportunities for counselling, opportunities for change. And this brings us to the letter of the week, Lila, and we'd be most interested to hear your insights as well. And Darren, you can put your 2.5 cents in as well. We've been inundated with letters from our listeners and watchers, so thank you so much for that, for participating. This letter is from Louisa, and she reads, Dear Done and Dusted, my former husband Ray and I have had a very hard time of separating. It is like he has punished me for being more successful than him. We were married 18 years before we separated. We have 2 boys, Adam aged 14 and Ken aged 12. After we separated, we sold our family home and split the proceeds. I used some of mine to buy an apartment. I made sure I had some money left over to contribute to the boys and their education. Ray put all of his money into a house. He kept nothing back. We went to mediation and it didn't settle. He wanted a share of my inheritance, which I got years before I met him, and he never did anything to contribute towards it. I have repartnered, but Ray has not. My new partner is often around, and I think him and the boys get on well. The boys were spending time week about with each of us. When out of the blue, he, and I think he means Ray, I think she means the father, Ray, arranged it so the boys left my place and went to live with him full time. They said they preferred being in the house rather than the apartment, despite the apartment being new and having everything they need, including their own bedrooms and en-suites. There are refusing to go back to week about. I think Ray has put them up to this. Ray always has to win. He wanted to get more money out of me at mediation for child support because he earns less. I smell a rat because he also thinks he will get more now because he's got the boys more. I realise the boys are growing up, but I really hate the way Ray went about persuading them to lie to me and sneak off with Ray when we had not even been to counselling to discuss what new arrangement might work better for the kids. Ray simply announced one day that they wanted to live with him. I said we should get some counselling, and then the boys were just gone. I'm not sure if I want to put them through a court hearing or getting one of those court reports. Help, Louisa. So that's the story. That's all we've got from Louisa, Lila. So Darren and I don't get the opportunity for me to ask for more instructions, and Darren can't cross-examine her. That's all she wrote. So in terms of Louisa's predicament with Ray suddenly out of the blue stealing off with a 14 and 12-year-old, and Louisa wanting to go to counselling, but that didn't happen. Where were some of the missed opportunities for this family, Lila?
Very much earlier on, before, when she was planning to repartner. And sometimes parents who have a partner and get a new partner forget that they're choosing that partner, but it's not the children's choosing. They are new partners imposed upon them. And so if a parent wishes to repartner, they should think about, first of all, going to counselling to talk about how will they introduce that to the children. What is it that they think that the children need the information about? How will this introduction occur? And is this partner actually a live-in one, or is just a boyfriend? And even if it was a boyfriend or girlfriend, in this case, children are pretty savvy these days. They'll pick up where mum is or dad is raised. So parents seem to have blinkers when they are now repartnering. That would have been a really good opportunity before a partnering. The step family is hard. Step parenting is not easy. Okay. People's roles change in the family dynamics. The children don't really know who they should be listening to, who is going to be the person who puts the boundaries on them. And if this person, if Louise's partner comes in and starts becoming very strict, well, those boys will run a mile anyway. You know what I mean? That's a missed opportunity. The other opportunity is actually letting the father know that there's been a repartnering, and having a conversation then, at least through a counselling process. What does that mean? Because it sounds from Louise's letter that he's not repartnered. So we have now boys who see mum being okay and dad being lonely. So we need to actually have another opportunity to talk about what does that mean for the boys when they're moving and they're having a different experience at dad's. Remember those journeys I talked about before, about the psychological journey of moving in the different dynamics in the household? That would have been another one. When children went over, that would be another opportunity. But certainly the children should be involved in counselling. It's not just the parents. It should be, especially given their ages. What did we say? 14
and 12.
Yeah, well,
yeah.
They've got some agency. They want to be able to say, well, this isn't working for me, right? Yeah. But from what comes from the letter, that the focus seemed to be more of a financial advantage or disadvantage rather than the emotional connection or nurturing that the boys need. And I'm sure they love both parents, but they've thought, I'll get more attention here than I am getting with mum. So yes, that's another opportunity to bring them back in and rebuild the bridges again. So there's been 3 or 4 areas that could have been looked in a bit earlier, rather than at the end when you're doing a reactive process rather than a preemptive process.
So it's very much the Louisa lens as opposed to Adam and Ken, the child lens, with Ray taking control, if you will. So very much a parent dispute, but the kids, and I love that fact that you've identified that they need some agency in all of this. So if you're doing a family report, assessing what the children are saying and creating that report for the court to better understand where the kids are coming from, that would feel very late in the piece for you, because there's clearly a conversation that coulda, shoulda, woulda happened if the conditions were right. Mum's saying, I would have liked counselling. So presumably, even though the children might have been concerned about, telling mum what they really felt, is counselling something that would enable those kids to open up and have the conversation with mum and dad about what might work best for them?
Because they're of an age where parent-adolescent counselling would really work well, because that provides a safe space for the children with a therapist or counsellor or psychologist to help them get their message across, even if the children feel that they will hurt mum if they say something. A counsellor can frame the conversation in a way that doesn't damage the relationships. but to try to keep them on track. If it's at the end, well, it becomes polarized a bit. You know, the children feel they have to take their position, even if they didn't want to. Earlier on, you'll have more of an opportunity of them being much more flexible about engaging with both parents. And we might actually have you'd have children with the parent-adolescent thing with mum as well as with the father. But also, I wouldn't ignore the new partner, because somewhere along the line, they need to know that's mum's new life, okay, and not to feel hurt by it. So there's a few areas that you do, but it's child inclusive parent-adolescent counselling.
So you're going to get a lot more opportunity in a case like this with having a good counsellor on board, because a court isn't going to serve Louisa, or more importantly, the children well in a case like this with a definitive outcome, when it's really a matter of social science in helping the children understand what's going on, helping the mother understand, and the father for that matter. But it's more of a inclusive process, isn't it, if you're doing it that way? Because I can just see it now. We got Louisa in the witness box. Well, the first question I'd ask her is, I see you calling the dad, you're accusing the dad of persuading him to lie to the children, or persuading the children to lie. Is there any other possible hypothesis in terms of why the children do not want to stay at your house? And I'd be interested to hear Louisa's comments, because this letter just reeks of a null hypothesis in terms of there's only one reason the kids are doing this, and this is because dad is undermining their relationship with me and my new partner. And it often happens in cases because people like to jump to that conclusion, but it's a lot more complex than that, isn't it, Lila, really?
It certainly is. And it comes across a little bit that the children are being engaged in a punitive approach towards mum, and that might not be the case at all. And so it's important for the children to express themselves that, you know, maybe it's not about the apartment or the house. And Louise is talking about, and they had everything there for themselves. Well, that looks like amenities and material things, but maybe that's not what the children needed at that point.
Yeah, I had a case the other day where the father had repartnered, and we'll use one of Louise's kids' names just for the hell of it, Adam. So Adam was 14 in this case, and he knocks on the door to go in his dad's room, and he opens up the door, and dad's girlfriend's in the bed, and the dad sits up in bed and says, "I'll meet your new mum."
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So no insight whatsoever on what that bomb is going to feel like for a 14-year-old boy developing into a man, for heaven's sakes.
Yeah, great role modelling.
That's the other thing. Children learn about relationships from their parents.
Yeah.
They learn about relationships from the way their parents interact, but also if they have new partners, okay? And they will model on that, because as they move, especially Adam and Kim, who are 14, as you say, an emerging adolescent, and a 12-year-old who's about to move into the teenagehood area, they're going to learn, well, that's what you do, you know. Yeah. As opposed to understanding how you develop relationships, how you meet people, how you discuss things, how you create roles together. You can't do a shock thing. And I can accept sometimes that parents go and feel, oh, good, somebody really likes me, this new person really likes me, and they regress into their own childhood or early adolescent stuff themselves and forget about their children are watching this.
And how awkward it might be, particularly if there's not a lot of demonstrative love as between mum and dad in the last throes of the relationship. So they're actually not used to demonstrations of affection between adults, and now suddenly they're in a completely different environment where they're having to experience that. And Lila, if we can touch back on how much better could a family therapy been to draw out some of these issues for Adam and Ken? How, if they had chosen counselling and child inclusive therapy, family therapy, what could you have done with Adam and Ken in terms of helping them find their voice?
Allow them to have their own space. I would see them individually because they are individuals. And we would talk and get them to give me a bit of insight into their world, which is very different to mum's world and dad's world, and even to their siblings' world, and try to help them look at what do they need from each parent, what do they need from mum, what do they need from dad, okay? What do they think mum and their parents understand about them? So I would actually give them a real good space for discussion, for openness, and if necessary, venting if they need to, but then help them craft some questions or some comments that they might want to say to each parent in a safe environment. And that's what I would bring the parents in and rehearse for the parents how to actually listen. Because a lot of parents don't tune in, they listen, and when they do listen, they're thinking of what they should ask, not what they're receiving. Yeah. Right? It seems to be a one-way street sort of thing. So in one was guiding the communication, guiding the messages that go across, and stopping or changing or getting them to rephrase it. And that, I think, for children of this age is really important, because then they feel empowered enough to go on to do it themselves, and they will learn conflict management with their own peers at school, how to restate things, how to change things, how to decide what you don't bother with. Right? So it's a really good area for children to learn a little bit for the future, and hopefully they can take it on into their own relationships later.
And it's important, I think, too, is it for the kids to feel a dollop of respect that they're receiving from their parents, that they're actually valued in the family unit. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's some of the questions that parents don't seem to be able to answer. You know, they come with what your children can't do rather than what the children can do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I love that whole concept that children are actually learning a different way of managing conflict. They're learning, as opposed to report writing, where you literally are examining the dead body and you're exhuming the past, but you're not actually creating anything for the future. You're taking the temperature of the family as you find it, or as I often refer to it as the dead cow floating upside down in the river, and we're all fixated on the dead cow. We're not honouring necessarily where the river came from or where the river is heading to. So I love that concept that family therapy can actually gift something to the players, the family members.
And lots of people think that family therapy is restoring the past. Once a separation or a change has occurred in a family system, you can't go and glue it back together that way. You have to reconstruct the future. So a good therapy is future focused. What have we learned from what worked or didn't work? Let's decide what we hold on to and move forward. Let's work on what new things we can do. But you know, I think the old version of counselling and therapy was used to about restoring the past or restoring your health from the before. Well, you're never going to do that because you're different. You're already different. You've already moved another week down and you're different to what you were last week. So the same thing doesn't occur. But people get stuck with that restorative stuff. But what you're trying to do is reconstruct this family system in a way that's workable for the future.
Yeah, important.
And you're forging new opportunities for this family unit, because it's still a family unit.
Yes, it's family. It's just that it's slightly differently organised.
Yeah, differently organised and geographically located in more than one location. So multiple locations, but also developing different traditions instead of, as you say, trying to force that family back into that cookie cutter.
And that's why You're forging new memories. Really, you're
Yeah.
creating new things, not trying to reconstruct. You know, parents will say,
Replicate the
"We've
past.
always done this. This is always we've done it." Well, okay, so now you've always done it. Now you have to do it differently. But they kind of get a bit stuck. And look, emotionally, that's part of the process of challenging their belief system, confronting some of their thoughts, and getting them to really look into themselves. What is it that, why are they so stuck? And if they're stuck, their children are going to be stuck, or else what happens, as I'm sure all both of you will have seen, the children become the parents to the children, to the parents.
Mm. Yeah.
And they have to then worry about the parents, as you say. They start to become emotionally responsible for the welfare of the parent. Yeah.
And when they do that, then the children, not because they become parentified, then they do not look after themselves. Their energy goes into managing their parents, not growing or learning. And I often say, if your energy is going into managing your parents, you're not going to do well at school, because you're thinking about what else you have to do. Where's your energy for learning?
Mm.
Exactly. Yeah.
That is absolutely fabulous, Lila. And if only we can work a little bit harder as practitioners to head families towards family therapy rather than the courtroom, because Darren and I see all too often and all too sadly that what we're really dealing with is that bloated dead cow in the middle of the river, rather than a different family future, a better prospect post-separation than was ever imagined during that really grim period of separation. No separation is easy. I don't care what anybody says, but you can make it better for the children.